Hi everyone, welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra. Today on John's Briefs, back again with my friend Tim Forshey. I told you last week, he did my NFA trust, and I currently have 5 suppressors in jail, ATF jail.
It's horrible.
It's horrible,
like
but,
doggy jail. Yeah.
but I want to talk to you and have Tim explain to us why an NFA trust is so valuable.
Firearms Legal Protection is who I trust to help me after a use of force incident. If you're a Firearms Legal Protection member, you can attend our monthly Active Self-Protection training seminars for free. Check out all they offer to their members at the link below.
Tim, again, these are legal documents and all this stuff, and I just want to say up front that I think the entire National Firearms Act should be abolished, and the Hughes Amendment should be abolished, and the Gun Control Act of '68 should be abolished, and all that stuff.
Let's not forget, our hero, Ronald Reagan, signed the damn thing. That's what's the most frustrating part about it. It just makes me so sad to think about it. But yes, you're right.
I think that
it really does cut down on crime. I think we're seeing that.
Yeah.
All the machine gun crime and the suppressor crime.
So
ridiculous.
It's a ridiculous thing. That said,
That's it.
in our current legal environment, having the National Firearms Act items, right now, if you go to buy one, you don't need a trust in order to do
That's
that.
right. You don't need one. That's right.
But why would you want one?
Well, I don't need to have a shirt on right now, but I think we're both
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, exactly. The short gist of it is, John, is that there's 3 ways that a person can legally acquire Class 3 firearms. I'm going to call them Class 3. As you probably know, they're more popularly referred to as Title 2 firearms, but everybody calls them Class 3.
Class 3 guns, yeah.
Class 3. Class 3 is actually the license that's required for somebody to deal in them, but we all call them Class 3. So there's 3 ways you can legally acquire Class 3 firearms. The first way is, as you just said, as an individual.
Right.
Anybody who's not a prohibited possessor can go through the process as an individual and purchase a Class 3 firearm.
And let's define Class 3 firearm. Generally speaking here, we're talking about fully automatic firearms, short-barreled rifles and shotguns, and suppressors.
Generally speaking, there's other categories, any other weapons, destructive devices,
grenades, crap like that.
Devices or grenades. In the wonderful state of Arizona, you can legally own all those items if you have enough money, basically, is what it boils down to. Yeah, so you can buy grenades here if you go through the hoops to do so.
If you go through the hoops to do so. And I just, I'm unclear on the process. Okay, I bought a grenade. I legally own this grenade. I use that grenade in a demonstration.
You use it. It has to be used in an appropriate manner. You have to have a magazine that it has to be stored in that's approved by ATF, and the magazine's probably going to cost you probably $1 million.
But then it goes kaboom, and now it dissipates. It doesn't exist anymore.
All that money is dust. Yeah.
Gone.
We think 50 BMG is expensive to ship. Try it out, right?
Okay, so that's what a Class 3 item is, and anybody can own one. You just go through the process as an individual.
In the state of Arizona, that's not true in all states, but in the state of Arizona, that's correct. As long as you're not a prohibited possessor, obviously, for any firearm-related item. So as an individual, and you basically fill out what's called a Form 4. If if you're not creating the item, if you're making an SBR, that's a Form 1, correct? But if you're doing a Form 4, and then there's an ATF form called Form 5320 that gives notice to local law enforcement, then you submit fingerprints, submit a photograph, and then you wait and tap your fingers for a long, long time until the government decides you're not a bad guy, and then they give you permission when they grant you what's called a tax stamp. There's also, unfortunately, a $200 tax for each such item that you have to pay to the federal government.
And the crazy part, when that was instituted in 34, that was a bunch of money.
In 1934, a new Model T Ford cost you about $400.
Right.
So it was an exorbitant amount of money back then. Thank God, I'm always nervous to say this on camera or in print,
that they haven't adjusted.
If Congress ever wakes up and realizes that they could raise that tax commensurate with the cost of living increases since 34, it would be several $1,000s.
So let me say, from my own perspective on that is an egregious offense against the lower socioeconomic status people.
Absolutely.
Because poor people have a right to keep and bear arms too. And
if you look back at the history of the NFA back in 1933, 34, when it was finally passed by Congress, originally they were slated to ban all guns, including handguns.
Wow.
But thank God, back then there was enough resistance to that they went ahead and excluded regular handguns and regular rifles, what we now call Title I firearms. But we came that close that long ago.
Wow. Yeah. So anybody can do it. But of course, when that tax stamp comes back from Uncle Sugar, then you and only you
That's correct.
Are allowed to possess that firearm.
Possession is a word that lawyers have a really good time with. There's constructive possession. There's actual possession. If I set my wallet on this table right now between the two of us, who's in possession of that wallet?
It's a great question.
You could arguably say that we're both in constructive possession of the wallet.
And we see this all the time, like, for instance, in traffic stops where there's a gun in the car.
Or drugs.
Or drugs in the car. Who's possessing those drugs? Well, as a general rule, if you're driving the car, you possess everything in the car.
You got a problem no matter what.
You got a problem.
Yeah. Yep.
And so this idea of whose is that? Well, if I have a suppressor, say, and it's in my name, well, then I'm the only one allowed to possess. Now, that means if I go to the range and hand you that gun,
that's considered to be fine.
Generally okay.
Generally okay. In fact, if you know, a lot of gun ranges allow you to rent Class 3 firearms and go out and shoot them on the range. Some of those ranges, in fact, I would say probably most, if not all, will have an employee from that range who is by license. Obviously, they're on the same documents, so they would then be standing relatively close to you as you shoot it. So there's no issue about constructive possession, right? So there's going to be somebody there with you babysitting you. They're not there to babysit you, especially people that they know what they're doing, but they're there because they don't want to get in trouble with the ATF.
Right. So, makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So, but then why then would I go through the problems of a trust? Because now I'm creating a federal document, I'm spending more money.
So getting back to where I was, there's 3 legal ways. So we talked about individual ownership.
Okay.
Then there's trust, which we'll get to in a moment. And then there's corporate. So any of the officers in a corporation have the same rights and responsibilities to anything owned by that corporation. That applies to Class 3 firearms as well. So you can set up a corporation to own your Class 3 firearms. Or you can do a trust. Okay. So let's get back to the individual. So if I own it as an individual and my friend John wants to borrow my suppressor to take his old buddies in college shooting this weekend because they've never shot a suppressor, and that would be really cool. John and me, and arguably the buddies in college, could all find ourselves going to prison.
Yeah, big time.
Okay, so that's a problem. Now, if I want my buddy John to have access to my suppressor or my machine gun or my short barrel rifle, whatever it was, then I can list you as a co-trustee on my NFA trust. Now we both have full rights and responsibilities. Okay, and I get clients all the time that they want to put a whole mess of people as co-trustees. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and throw a really wide net. And frankly, I'll list as many as you'd like me to list, but here's the problem. Any of those people have full rights and responsibilities, which means they can sell them.
Yeah.
They can swing by, take it out of the safe, go sell it. And that is perfectly legal. Wait a minute. I paid $46,000 for that machine gun. Yeah, I know, but I owned it too because I'm on the trust. So I thought I could use the dough, so I sold it. You have legally no repercussion whatsoever. Right. It's like your wife taking money out of the savings account.
Well, because the trust is its own legal entity, and anything that is owned by the trust belongs to the legal entity.
Exactly. And if you have legal access to the trust's assets, so that's one caveat when people start throwing this really wide net and they want to list their housekeeper as a co-trustee. You better really trust her.
Be careful.
Exactly. Be careful. So the other thing that comes up is, so what we call this is accidental felonies. And where it comes up a lot with spouses, and I've actually faced this case, is I had a client one time went to the range with a suppressor, shot with his buddies. It was August in Arizona. For those of you watching in other parts of the country, that's the time of year we hate you. 115 degrees. He comes home, he's covered in dust and sweat, and he can't bear the thought of unloading his truck. So he goes in, grabs a beer, gets in the shower. I'll unload the truck in a little while. While he's in the shower, his wife, who had a Prius, decided that she would run to Costco and get a 100-pound bag of dog food. And she'd just go ahead and grab his truck to do that. So she's on her way to Costco, gets involved in a fender bender, breaks her ankle.
Wow.
Cops show up. They call him to come get the car. He's in the shower, doesn't hear the phone ring. They take her to the hospital. They impound the car. When they inventory the car, guess what they find in the car?
They find a suppressor.
She's in possession of a suppressor. Nobody went to jail, but they spent a bunch of money on legal fees and a lot of sleepless nights until we got that sorted out.
Wow.
So that's a problem. We call that an accidental felony. So an NFA trust prevents that as well because you just list your spouse on the NFA trust. And then lastly, we all hate to think about it, but sorry, we're all going to die.
Yeah, 100%.
And when I pass away and my spouse opens up my safe to start the process of getting rid of my stuff that she doesn't want anymore, the minute she cracks that safe, she's a felon.
Yeah.
She's in constructive, if not actual possession of a Class 3 firearm that's registered to someone else. And so to avoid those problems, we set up a trust. And we name the people that you do want to not be exposed to that in that trust. You can set up a corporation, but it costs a lot more to set up a corporation than it does a trust. And then you have to spend money each year to maintain that corporation. You've got to do your corporate minutes. You've got to pay your corporate stat agent. Right. And also the last thing that's very important is that corporation is public record. It's listed with the Arizona Corporation Commission. If I'm suing you and I have my private investor do an assets check on you, he's going to find out that you're an officer in a corporation. I'm going to then subpoena that corporation to find out what their assets are. I'm going to find out it has a Class 3 firearms collection. If you have an NFA trust, it is completely confidential. No one knows it exists except when you use it with the ATF.
So it seems like a good idea to me.
I think they're good ideas. Yeah, very cheap insurance.
And okay, I'm just going to plug my friend Tim because it's a federal document. You can do them for anybody.
Yeah, I can do it for anybody. The thing that a lot of people ask me is, why would I pay an attorney to do it when I can get one online that costs me $93?
I think that's
a totally legitimate question.
Valid question.
You can also go to a Hallmark store and buy a will kit and do your own will and trust. No problem. Yeah. You can do that. I can go home tonight And if my toilet's leaking, I'm pretty sure I can figure out how to fix my toilet.
Right.
I'll probably have to make 3 trips to Home Depot, and my wife will be upset, and my house might smell like
Not worth my time to do
We've all been there. But the point is that I can do it. If you have a professional do it, it's going to be done correctly with 0 headaches on your part. And if something goes wrong, guess whose problem that is now? It's not yours.
It's under your E&Os.
If the toilet leaks after I paid the plumber to fix it, it's the toilet. It's the plumber's responsibility to fix the toilet.
Right.
I've frankly, knock on wood, never had one go bad. But the fact is you have the assurance of somebody who does not want to get sued for malpractice that will stand behind that product and fix it for you. So to me, that's just one of those things. I don't want to pay a plumber either, but I'd rather pay a couple $100 for a plumber than have all the heartburn that comes along with no plumber.
Right.
So
generally speaking,
I think,
what's a quality NFA trust from somebody like you?
You see them go anywhere from 500 on probably the low end up to about 4,000. If you have like a large gun collection, you've got several machine guns, that sort of thing. A lot of people seem to think that the more pages it has, the more paragraphs it has, the more it's worth. And I think good lawyers will admit that it's just the opposite. The simpler the document
simple,
is, the better
concise.
it is. So mine is relatively simple, and I'm on the far lower end of that spectrum. But it's hard to just quote a price because it depends upon what their needs are and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, in the $500 to $1,000 range, something like that. Yeah.
So I recommended enough that I have one, right? I wasn't in the suppressor game for a long time in the NFA game because I was kind of scared of this process, quite frankly. Of course, I did mine and got my paperwork in about 3 weeks before the ATF decided to go electronic filing.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So that was a great timing because now mine
That's a good excuse to go buy another one now, John.
See,
for those of you,
hopefully Laura watches this.
For those of you that haven't, my wife too. For those of you who haven't got into this game, be very careful because I remember the very first time I bought a suppressor, and I thought, this is dumb. I don't need this. This is $600 that I'm wasting. It should go to my daughter's college account. This is ridiculous. And then I went out and shot it. And within 4 minutes, it was like, why do I not have these for every firearm I own? And of course, now I do. It's kind of like eating a chip. I can resist a bowl of chips, but once I have a chip, I got to have some more. Chips. Yeah, so be wary.
And I believe in the suppressor world, I think, for home defense guns, having the hearing protection on the gun
People don't get that.
makes it a lot easier. Yeah. You're not going to completely get away from, if you're doing a rifle, the overpressure on a 223 is humongous. So the suppressor almost completely ameliorates that. And that's the big problem with a 223, especially with a home defense gun, right? I might have a Salvo 12 for my 12 gauge in jail right now. Cool. It's kind of fun, you know what I mean? So,
no country for old men.
Yeah, we're going to see that kind of come on the channel as they show up once mine finally get out of jail, but I would recommend it. Now, I'm not telling you guys, hey, hear me, okay? If you've got a good local attorney that you know and you have a great relationship with, man, I have a good relationship with Tim. So guess what? He did my NFA trust. If you don't and you're like, I don't know an attorney to do that stuff, hit him up. I'll put a link in the description so that you can and find that stuff. And listen, he volunteered his time to come and do this. So throw him some bucks. Would you get some of his things?
Yeah, we need to make sure we get the lawyers paid.
Pay for his suppressors.
Like John said, if you know somebody local that's a very savvy Pro 2A lawyer that does NFA trust, I would recommend you do it local because there might be some subtle differences.
100%.
But yeah, if you don't know of anybody, give me a buzz. If not, maybe I can refer you to somebody.
So, NFA trusts, are they valuable? I think so. Get one.